Wanting to impress their coach or simply just desperate for a win, the Habs were able to pull it off on Tuesday night against the Rangers, but can they keep it up? This is Hockey Inside Out. I'm Adam Susser. Before we start the show, I just want to alert all of our viewers that next week we're going to be airing on Friday, March 2nd, instead of our regular Thursday time slot to account for the trade deadline, which is on March 1st. So you're going to want to check out that episode on Friday. I'm sure the panel's going to have a lot to talk about. Speaking of panels, let's meet today's panel. I'm here with Mr. Stu Cowan and Eric Engels, joining us from Sportsnet. Thanks for being here, Eric.
My pleasure.
Okay, let's get started here with today's topics of conversation. Number one, what are your first impressions of Claude Julien as head coach? Number two, should we be surprised that it took all of 2 periods for Alex Galchenyuk to be taken off the first line? Number three, was the OT victory over the Rangers a turning point in the Habs season? Number four is our viewer question of the week, which asks, does the recent firing/hiring clear PK Subban of being the problem? And number five, do you think the Habs would ever consider trading Carey Price? Let's start the show. After a bad first game against Winnipeg, the Canadiens desperately fought for a second chance at making a good first impression on their new coach and beat the New York Rangers in a shootout win on Tuesday night. After 2 games in 1 week with the Habs, what are your first impressions of Claude Julien behind the Canadiens bench?
Well, I don't know about you, Stu, but for me, I see a man that's extremely organized, a guy that's methodical, a guy that clearly puts the emphasis on the defensive side of the puck to create offense. He said as much, obviously, to us. And I think, the players were desperately in need of some kind of spark here. If he can give it quicker rather than later, that's going to be key, because it's such a difficult thing to make a coaching change at this stage of the season. I know we've seen other teams succeed with it, but it's not an automatic that right away you turn it around. So that was a big win against the New York Rangers, and maybe that's a sign of more to come.
He seems to me almost like the friendly uncle. He comes in, he seems just a happy guy, he's comfortable in his skin. Mike McCarron was talking to me in the locker room, and he said, for lack of a better word, there's no bull, what with him, you know where you stand, he's fair, he's kind of, he just seems to be, after Michel Therrien, who can be a little rough around the edges, he seems like he's a little more rounded as a coach, and maybe a little easier guy to get along with, at least at first. And I think this team needed, as he said, he came in and he wanted guys to feel happy, feel good about themselves, saying this team is better than they have been playing, and his job now is to get them back.
Yeah, and Therrien certainly had a way of being a little bit duplicitous with his players in terms of what he said to the media. I'm not here to knock Michel Therrien. I thought he did a very good job as Canadiens coach, but every coach in the National Hockey League has deficiencies. Julien himself in Boston had a reputation of being a boring style coach who had trouble with some of the young players. I think you see that with a lot of players, or a lot of coaches, I should say, of his generation that have been around for a couple of decades by now, and they have those issues. They want to trust their veterans. And you look at that Boston team, it was a veteran-laden team. The guys like Bergeron and Chara, who were always going to be the key voices relaying the message. I think you look at this Montreal team, yes, there's some young players that play important roles, but they're really the veterans that run this team, and Shea Weber and Max Pacioretty and Carey Price. They're all guys that have been around a long time. He's got a good group to rely on in that regard, and that's going to help him.
And Julien, as all good coaches, is a defense-first coach. You can't win without that. Mike Babcock's even talked about that in Toronto with all the young guns. He has defenses first. But the practice that Julien had the other day was interesting, because so much of it was working on defense in their own end, but getting the puck back. He talked about the importance of puck possession. He says, I'm not talking about analytics. I'm just saying, the more you have the puck on your stick, the better chances you have. And he's talking about swarming the opposing players in the defensive zone to get the puck back and head back in the offensive zone. As he said, if you spend 2/3 of your shift in the defensive zone, by the time you get in the offensive zone, you have nothing left anyway. So it was a really intense practice, and it was just interesting to look at the way he had players attacking the puck, and he's been doing the same thing now with the penalty kill, which was they would lay back and let guys move around. They're much more aggressive on that too. So that's 2 of the first things I've really noticed about him with the changes he's put in.
Okay, Alex Galchenyuk started Saturday night's game against Winnipeg as the frontline center. Were you surprised that it took 2 periods for him to be taken off the first line?
I wasn't surprised at all, because you just have to watch him play. Right now there's a confidence issue with Alex Galchenyuk. I think it has a lot to do with the 2 injuries that he suffered, or the injury, and then he re-injured his knee. You could see certain signs of a player being timid. When he goes in on a forecheck and instead of tying up his man, does a one-handed poke check or flies by, there's an issue there. It's clear that he doesn't want to get too far into the mix right now, and I think there's a mental obstacle for him to get over. I think he needs to have a couple good things happen for him in a game to get the confidence up, to start feeling more aggressive. There were 2 players that he was alongside from the end of last year through the beginning of this year that were scoring on the same pace as he was. Their names are Sidney Crosby and Mark Scheifele. We know the talent is there for Galchenyuk. Maturity has certainly been an issue with him. He has matured a lot, but he's got a far way to go, and everybody in the Canadiens and people outside the Canadiens have acknowledged as much. Now it's just a question, is he going to get that confidence back and be the player they need him to be? Because, Stu, I'm sure you agree, they need him to be a top-line center.
They do. And I mean, the knee injury, Brendan Gallagher, hand injury, you can still skate, you can still ride the bike, you can still keep your cardio going. A knee injury twice, he's not in 100% game shape yet. But as you say, the concern is, he seems to be concerned about getting hurt again. He went 2 for 9 in the faceoff circle against Winnipeg. He said that during the bye week, he went back to Florida, but he rented some ice. He worked with a skating coach, and he brought in Olli Jokinen, a former NHL centerman, to help him work on faceoffs, which makes me wonder, well, who's working on faceoffs with him when he's here? But, he knows what he has to do. The question is, can he do it? And Claude Julien showed that he didn't really have a lot of long leash for him to get that together. We're putting Phillip Danault right back there. And with Phillip Danault, Max Pacioretty has talked many times this season about how much he loves playing with Phillip Danault and what a smart hockey player he is. So that might factor into it also, I think.
Yeah, I also think Galchenyuk has become like the most annoying player to talk about within the fan base and the media and all that, because he's so polarizing. And the minute you have any kind of criticism for Galchenyuk, it's as though people will accuse you of not recognizing the fact that he's an excellent player. He is an excellent player. He's got all-world skill. Everybody knows that. Was he misused by Michel Therrien? I'm not sure I would go that far, but he definitely wasn't used to his potential at times. And when it comes down to it, the player has to take responsibility. Right now, the way he's playing, Claude Julien cannot play him over 17 minutes a game. He cannot get him on the ice. If you watch the game against the Rangers, every time the puck touched the stick, he gave it away. And those are, I'm sure, a part of that confidence issue and the willingness to engage and get into the fight because he's afraid of getting hurt again. And those are serious issues that get worked out over time, and they're normal issues to have for a player that suffers the kind of injury that he had. But right now, they just need something more from him. They need him to be the aggressor. And, you could talk all you want about how he was misused and this and that. Alex Galchenyuk, if he is as good of a player as everybody seems to think he is, at least his biggest supporters think he is, needs to, number one, be a self-starter, and number two, he needs to make the players around him better, and that's been his biggest problem since he entered the National Hockey League.
And the fact he's back with Gallagher, his buddy, they came in as rookies together, roommates together, and Byron, it's not like he's not playing with any talent. I mean, he's got two guys
that bring him into the fight.
That bring him into the fight and play. Brendan Gallagher against the Rangers looked like the old Brendan Gallagher, crashing the net again, banging, doing some of the stuff that we hadn't seen him do before. But with Galchenyuk, it's going to, now it's up to you. Okay, you're not on the first line. Make these guys, if you're that good of a hockey player, make these two guys that you are with even better. And they're already good hockey players. We were talking before the show, and you had mentioned that on the penalty shot, in the shootout, if Galchenyuk, he hit the post, and as you mentioned before, if that goal had gone in, I think that might have given him even more of a boost, but it's going to be interesting to see how he goes moving forward from here.
Okay, sorry. Next question was the overtime victory against the Rangers, 3-2, a turning point back in the right direction for the Habs. Are we winning the Cup?
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far to make that proclamation, and certainly wouldn't bet my money on it, but at the same time, they showed there was so much positive to take out of that game for the team. Number one, the confidence goes automatically right back up. The effort level from the players and from Carey Price, typified on that save by Carey Price, that game saver.
Save of the year,
there was nothing pretty about it. He really, it was pure desperation to get over and get the back of his arm on that puck, because if you look at a freeze frame of that shot from JT Miller, who's the leading scorer of the New York Rangers, I'm not sure how many people knew that, Carey Price is so far out of the picture by the time that puck gets on his stick. But it really typified the way the entire team played in the game. They played desperately. Yes, there were mistakes made in that game. In fact, I could count 5 glaring mistakes that were made, but they were all of the same nature. And you know what? There was even a positive in the way they made mistakes in that game, because they were all born of being aggressive in the offensive zone. The most glaring mistake was an offensive pinch by Andrei Markov. The puck goes to Max Pacioretty on the wall. He's not able to get it deep. It kicks back the other way, and Jeff Petrie gets caught in a one-on-one situation with Rick Nash, and that's Rick Nash's specialty. I know people didn't like the effort of Jeff Petrie on that play. If Jeff Petrie looks at his skates to find that puck, Rick Nash is gone, and that's exactly what happened. But that play was born of an aggressive offensive system for the Canadiens where they're trying to be 5 guys in every zone. They're trying to be five guys compact. We saw that all over the ice in that New York Rangers game. You almost take the Winnipeg game and throw it out the window because there was a confluence of different factors, from the bye week to having a new coach to the pressure that just made it one of those throwaway games that you don't learn that much from. But Claude Julien clearly learned about where he wanted to make the adjustments and where he wanted to get his team focused, and it was apparent all over the ice in spite of the mistakes.
And as you were saying, that's exactly what they were working on in practice before this game, was that attacking the opposition, getting the puck back, going back, and it's exactly the same. Like with Rick Nash, if he gets a step on anybody, they're not stopping him. I mean, that was, as you say, Petrie got a little bit unlucky on that one. And but it's, as I say, it's going to be interesting to see now, a little bit more practice time. I think as they keep going forward, we're saying, are they going to win the Stanley Cup? I mean, if Carey Price plays like he did last night, anything is possible when we get in the Stanley Cup playoffs with a goalie playing like Carey Price. But it's going to be interesting to see how much more Claude Julien can implement his system and how quickly he can do it moving forward.
Yeah, and the best things we've seen there, very clearly from a tactical perspective, you talked about the penalty kill before. The Canadiens were in a diamond formation all season long on the penalty kill. And I spoke to a player, and I'm not going to say who it is, who doesn't play penalty kill, who told me that when the Canadiens, their forwards, were lining up in a straight line in front of the defense, the guys were just confused about who needs to go out and chase the puck, and they were leaving the half wall exposed. And that's where the play gets generated on the power play. If you are aggressive on the half wall player, you are going to do a better job of getting the puck out. We saw the Canadiens be much more aggressive up the ice when the puck is not in their zone on the penalty kill. That limited the time that the puck was in their zone. We've seen them come together as a unit in the defensive zone. They're much closer together, which can make up for a guy like Alex Galchenyuk, who's a little bit lost in that zone. So there's tactical adjustments going on that I think are going to lend to better hockey. And, we can joke all we want about the Stanley Cup and what the prospects are for the Canadiens, having watched them play their worst stretch of hockey in a very long time. But the reality is they do have a team that's a very good team. And with Carey Price playing the way he played in New York, he's going to give that team confidence, and I think we're going to see something a lot better from them moving forward.
Well, they're not as good as they were when they were 13-1-1 to start the season, and they're not as bad as they were when they were 6-1 in that 8-game slump.
I happen to believe, and this is contrary to what people may think, they're closer to being the team that was 13-1-1 than they are than the one that sputtered out of control over the last month.
Okay, at this point of the episode, it's time for our HIO viewer question of the week. This week's question comes to us from Ian Kutschke from West Bolton, Quebec, who asks, does the recent firing and hiring of the coaches clear PK Subban as being the problem? Was it as simple as that? that was it? Yes, no? What do you think?
Yeah, I think PK Subban was cleared a long time ago. At the end of the day, you could talk about a scapegoat. I think certainly he was used as a scapegoat here in Montreal. That doesn't mean that PK meshed perfectly with his teammates and wasn't an issue at times with them on and off the ice. So at the end of the day, I've moved on from PK Subban. I don't know about you, Stu.
My feeling on PK Subban will always be the same. PK Subban, if you didn't like him, tough if you were in the room. The guy came to play. If he didn't come to play every shift, if he wasn't the hardest working guy on the ice, if he didn't give everything he had, if he didn't love being a Montreal Canadian, if he wasn't all in, yeah, I could see issues in the room. But if you don't like his personality, well, 20 guys in the room, you're not going to like everybody's personality, deal with it. And as we said before, I think the problem in the room last year had more to do with how the other guys dealt with PK Subban than it did with actually PK Subban himself. Yeah,
and I'm not too sure the struggles that the Canadiens have had this year could be related to a problem in the room. I don't really believe that they have that. And I believe that the so-called problem in the room last year was really a total exaggeration. Losing a lot of games will drive people apart. That's just what happens. I spoke to several players, but Ben Scrivens was one player who told me after, whatever issues there were in their room were no more than any I've seen in any losing locker room, and we know he's been in a few of them. It's just what it is. Controversy gets out of control in Montreal. It gets blown up to epic proportion. At the end of the day, though, PK Subban, you want to go back on that book. I always said this from the start of that trade. He was a much bigger loss for the city of Montreal than he was for the Canadiens. He's a tremendous player. You can't argue with anything he did on the ice, but his style fit a lot less with the way Marc Bergevin and Michel Therrien wanted to run this team than Shea Weber's style did. And the move that Marc Bergevin made wasn't a let's have this pay off 5 years down the line kind of move. It was a let's win now kind of move. And I think everything we've seen since then has been made in the same vein. And that's why, we're just a few days away from the trade deadline. And I think there's more coming.
And we're a few days away from PK Subban's return to Montreal also.
Yeah,
I've said right from the beginning, I think in the long run, Nashville's going to win this trade. But we'll see in the short run what's going to happen.
So we are a few days away from the trade deadline. You think they're going to trade Price?
No.
Would the Canadiens ever trade Price?
Yeah,
I think that's the question.
I think it's a question that a lot of people are going to be asking as his contract comes to term in the summer of 2018. The only way that it could happen is if Carey Price begs out of town. And I just don't see that happening. He's going to be the highest paid Montreal Canadien of all time. He's going to be the highest paid goaltender in NHL history. There is value, obviously, in considering the possibility of moving him because there's no team in the cap era that has won a Stanley Cup with their goaltenders making upwards of $10 to $12 million in combination, let alone one of them making that kind of money. But Carey Price is the kind of guy that could take you all the way all by himself, and there's no way, Stu, that they can let this guy go for any reason. So,
well, they let PK go, and I wonder would there be more upset if Price went than there was when PK went. And I wouldn't look into trading Carey Price this season. I think we got to see, is he the real Carey Price? Is the Carey Price we saw in New York? Is he going to be back to that form the rest of the season? But I think this summer Marc Bergevin would be mistaken if he didn't at least throw it out there to see what he might get in return for Carey Price and what might be offered by a team desperate for goaltending. And you got Charlie Lindgren, who I know it's the AHL, but he's been an all-star in the AHL. You have a young guy coming up, and I wonder how many, as you say, Carey Price is going to get a lot of money and a lot of term. And I just wonder moving forward if you can get 2 or 3 other players in exchange for him, if that might help them better.
The irony is that the goaltending market traditionally has never generated the kind of return that you would ever consider for trading a guy like Carey Price. Like Ben Bishop is currently an unrestricted free agent. He's been on the market for a while. And if Tampa Bay had fielded the kind of offers they'd like to get, and I would probably consider that he might very strongly be moving between now and March 1st, they would have moved him by now. And I'm not saying Carey Price is on a different level than anybody else. If he was seriously on the market, he would generate a very significant return. But there's no way that the Canadiens are going to be the ones who initiate that. He's the biggest leader on the team. He is a guy that has been proven in the past, not necessarily in the NHL with the teams he's had in front of him, but on the international level, he's shown that he can be the difference between a win and a silver medal or a bronze medal or whatever it may be. I'll tell you one thing about that whole situation. There is zero chance that Carey Price is taking a discount to stay in Montreal.
Well, yeah,
there's no reason to do it.
There's no
he's
reason
the
he
best
would.
goalie in the world, and he's a guy who grew up in the mountains, in the woods, and to come here has been completely out of his personality, and he's lived with a lot of things here that have admittedly made him uncomfortable, but there's just no reason for him to take a discount to stay with all of that.
And he's got a family now. He's a father too, and you wonder if he wouldn't rather be back Vancouver or somewhere on the West Coast, somewhere closer to his family. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Okay, that is our show for today. We want to thank you all for tuning in. Thank the panel for showing up, Stu and Eric. Once again, next week we'll be airing on Friday, March 2nd, instead of our regular Thursday time slot, because we're going to be talking about what happened on the trade deadline. You know the drill. Like, subscribe, comment, share, all that stuff. My name's Adam Susser. I'll see you next week, Habs fans.